Back in 2022, there were a total of 115 pirate attacks worldwide. On average, these pirates managed to take off with over $3 million per attack. However, 2022 represented a year of particularly low pirate activity. In total, over the past decade, there have been over 1,900 pirate attacks, representing more than $6.3 billion in ransom. So that begs the question, why do governments and nations even comply with pirate demands, instead of, sending their navies or armies to deal with the threat of piracy once and for all? And as with many things, the answer has a lot to do with economics and money. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and then join me as I take a deep dive into the past and present to unravel the hidden economics of pirate societies. Now, when you're thinking of pirates, you're probably thinking of this ragtag crew of sea bandits. You're thinking of these violent and immoral, disorganized bunch of bad apples trying to kidnap people all over the place. But the truth is, pirate societies were highly structured. They formed organizations, they managed labor, resources, communications channels, and transportation. In these pirate societies, there were investors, a clear hierarchy of organization. There were terms and conditions, contracts and policies. There was even a democratic decision-making process involved with the entire crew. I mean, some pirate societies also created their own pirate stock exchange to manage investments. Now, this all stems from the fact that all pirates, whether they come from rich families, poor families, or even if they're from former enslaved colonies, all pirates have one primary goal, and that is to turn a profit. Even the economist Adam Smith was impressed by the high social organization amongst pirates, and this was dictated by the invisible hand of the market. Simply put, pirates, like companies, turn to structures that help to best maximize the returns and reduce risk. And according to some historians, piracy may have even led to the birth of modern capitalism. I mean, historians looked into why Britain was the first to embrace industrialization and not other commercially rich European states like Holland or other Italian republics. They found that Britain got its early advantage through smuggling resources. At a time when trade wasn't moving freely, this helped the country to get the resources it needed to meet local demands. And this commercial opportunity, which was provided by smuggling by the way, actually led Britain to develop production capabilities that were the key ingredients in the Industrial Revolution. So basically, without smuggling, the Industrial Revolution may have never happened. And the best people for the job for this kind of smuggling, well, you guessed it, they were pirates. Even during this golden age of piracy, when pirates could actually take on military vessels, they actively tried to find ways to minimize conflict. Some historians think that pirates cultivated an image where they were violent and barbaric for the purpose of avoiding having to be violent and barbaric. They created an image where people perceived them to be barbaric, violent, and very scary, just so that they could minimize their losses and maximize profits. Generating bad PR for profits? Now, I think that's a really smart move. So this reputation of being violent and barbaric actually ensured that it made more sense for merchant ships to just hand over their valuables rather than actively fight back. It just wasn't worth it. And this ensured that pirates would suffer minimal losses for their loot. It was just smarter to give in. By the way, fun fact, ironically, one of the most successful, richest pirates in history, Sam Bellamy, was not known for his cruelty, but for his mercy and generosity. Most famously, when his crew captured the English merchant ship Whydah, he is said to have offered his own ship to the ship's captain as trade so that they could make their way safely back home. And you've probably heard of Blackbeard, who in popular culture is depicted as this cruel and intimidating pirate captain. But surprisingly, there are very few records of him, and none that show that he even murdered anyone. And I know that's a low bar, not murdering anyone, but given Blackbeard's reputation, this sheds a bit more light on the matter. Now, it's important to note that pirates were not all good. They weren't saintly. They were not the good guys. They were simply smart, and they calculated their costs and risks, and based on this, they behaved accordingly. There are records that show that their treatment would be very different if a ship's crew would actively resist. They wanted to send this message that the people that they were looting should never fight back. So to set an example, sometimes pirates would deliberately engage in some of the worst acts of violence against their captives just to set an example. Again, they use this for PR purposes and to gain a reputation so that their jobs would be easier in the future. Now this is best illustrated by the account of Kafi Khan, a historian who was on board a Mughal ship that was attacked by English pirates. Now according to him, after the English pirates took hold of their ship, they, and I quote, subjected their captives to an orgy of horror that lasted for several days, raping and killing their terrified prisoners deck by deck. I mean, some of the women even chose to commit suicide rather than risk capture. And these pirates actually got off with about 600,000 pounds. In today's value, that would be more than 140 million pounds. So yeah, pirates were not the good guys, not at all. They were just smart and strategically very cruel when they needed to be. Now, this brings us to the question, why do nations and governments even pay ransom to pirates? Why not just fight back and destroy them? And the answer is, paying the ransom is unfortunately usually the best option. The amount demanded by pirates is not random. In fact, these ransom amounts are very carefully and deliberately calculated. A pirate wants to get as much profit as possible, but if he asks for too much, it would increase the nation's likelihood of a military response instead of just giving in to their demands. That's why when you look at it from a purely economic perspective, paying a few $1,000,000 to allow billions worth of cargo to arrive at a port on time makes more economic sense. From private companies' point of view who owns these ships, it's actually especially true when it comes to delaying shipments. I mean, you wouldn't want to hurt your future contracts and future economic losses just because you had to pay ransom. It would make more sense to just pay the ransom and get it over with. And this cost-benefit analysis is also why merchant vessels usually don't have large security teams, at least they didn't back in the day, because paying the ransom would be cheaper than hiring a large security team. Now, when it comes to calculating the ransom amounts, miscalculations can always happen, but this results in a lot of disaster for the pirates. For example, Somalia used to be the epicenter of piracy. However, the pirates started to get a bit too greedy, and they held ships' crew members for hostage for longer periods of time in hopes of negotiating better deals. But instead, it resulted in anti-piracy operations being launched by some of the world's major navies, including those of the United States, United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. You see, shipping companies themselves also started to begin hiring security teams on board their ships. Altogether, this almost ended up eliminating the pirate threat in the region. And nowadays, most of the pirate operations happens in the Ghanaian coast. A similar situation occurred about 2 centuries ago when the Barbary states that used to operate off of North Africa started to demand continuing tribute from the United States. They thought that the Americans, like the Europeans, would simply pay up instead of fighting a costly war. The Americans, however, chose the latter option, making it the first war in the nation's history on foreign soil. Now, this story of pirate societies is actually very interesting because it shows us that even without external established rules and regulations, when there's an economic impact involved, people end up creating their own laws and customs. That's exactly what pirate societies have done. Now, this is not a society that needs to be admired in any way, but it is one to be studied to understand why governments and criminals both end up thinking about cost-benefit analysis in eerily similar ways. If you like this video, I'm sure you'll like this video as well that we made about the Boston Tea Party. So check it out here, and I'll see you soon.